Hey guys, JT here, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about a very expensive mistake I made that involves this inverter and nearly £5,000 to put it right. So if you want to know more and you want to learn how you can avoid making the same mistake that I did, then stick around to the end because I've got some great tips for you. With that, let's get into it. In a previous video, we discussed my old solar system which we commissioned back in 2010. It ran flawlessly for 14 years, but in September 2022, with electricity prices being the most expensive I've ever known, we decided it was time for an upgrade. Now, we didn't want to miss out on the very generous government payments as part of the Feed-In Tariff, and because the system had already paid for itself, all that free money was still there for the taking. So we worked with a local solar firm to devise an expansion plan that would preserve our FIT payments, give us some new generating capacity, and cover our electricity use. Sounds simple? Well, not so much. Let's start with the old system. As I mentioned in my second video, the feed-in tariffs are now closed to new customers, and you can't upgrade the capacity of an existing system and still get paid under the scheme. So the existing system had to stay at the same capacity that it was. But we wanted to get some better visibility into what the system was doing. So we upgraded the inverter to a lovely new SolarEdge system. My old Fronius IG20 inverter had zero monitoring. Back in 2010, it really wasn't even a thing. It had a basic LCD panel on the front showing what it was generating, but to actually check on it, you had to climb into the attic and read it with a torch. Now, you might think we could just swap out the inverter and be done. But it wasn't that simple. SolarEdge, which was the company that we chose, uses Optimzers to allow panel level monitoring. They also help with shading, so if a tree or something shades one panel, it doesn't affect the entire array and reduces your output. So that meant we needed to put scaffolding up so that people could get on the roof, they could remove the old panels, fit the optimizers to each panel, and then refit the panels to commission the new inverter. We then had to notify our FIT provider that we'd changed the inverter, but we hadn't altered the capacity. Everything was good. We were still eligible under the original FIT scheme. We were happy. That doesn't sound like an expansion though, does it? Well, let me tell you a little bit about my roofs and how they're orientated. My house is orientated with the front-facing roof facing east-northeast and the rear-facing roof west-southwest. And then we have a single-car garage with a roof facing southeast. Now, none of the remaining roof spaces are ideal. Neither of them point due south. They're all kind of off to one side, or in the case of the front-facing roof, pointing in a completely different direction. We decided to add 8 395-watt Hyundai panels to the northeast facing roof and 4 to the garage roof facing south-southeast. Now you're probably thinking, adding panels to an east-northeast roof, they won't produce much power. And in the winter, you're correct, they don't produce an awful lot. However, in the summer, the sun rises in that general direction at around 4:30 in the morning, and by 5 AM, they're usually generating quite a lot of power. Now, because we can't interfere with the FIT scheme system, a second inverter was needed in the garage for those new panels. We also took the opportunity to install 20 kilowatt hours of battery storage, as this was zero rated for VAT. Now today, battery storage is zero rated no matter what you do, but back in 2012, we had to purchase it with solar to get that 20% saving. And that was worth it. That was not an insignificant saving. I think we saved somewhere in the region of £3,000. Now here's where I made an expensive mistake. Let me explain this with the aid of a diagram. The SolarEdge system is a hybrid system, meaning the batteries are DC coupled in that they sit behind the inverter, which is between them and the mains distribution panel for the house. This allows the solar panels, which produce DC power, to dump them straight into the batteries, which also store DC power. We don't suffer any conversion losses converting from DC to AC and then back into DC to put it into a battery. This is really great on sunny days as we don't waste any power at all. All of the excess goes straight into the batteries. However, To get it out of the batteries, it must go through the inverter to be converted from DC into AC when you want to draw on that power. Each SolarEdge battery stores 9.7 kilowatt hours and can output a maximum of 5 kilowatts per battery. So 2 times 5 kilowatts was more than enough to run our house during the busiest periods. And with nearly 20 kilowatt hours of stored energy, this should make us almost self-sufficient, except maybe on the darkest depths of winter days. The solar installer proposed a 3.6 kilowatt inverter with the new system and 20 kilowatts of batteries, and I signed the order. Now, we had an excellent brand new system with a 3.6 kilowatt inverter and batteries capable of supplying 10 kilowatts. Have you spotted my error yet? No matter what my home demanded, the maximum I could get from the batteries was 3.6 kilowatts because of that DC to AC conversion. So during long cold winter nights, I could power the oven, or the microwave, or the kettle, or the washing machine, or the dishwasher, but not 2 at the same time. Otherwise, we'd have to draw power from the grid. And the whole reason for me installing this system was to reduce my reliance upon the grid. With electricity prices being the most expensive I'd ever seen at that point, I didn't want to be drawing power from the grid. Don't get me wrong, this is not the fault of anybody else but me. I signed off on the solution and I really didn't understand the hybrid inverter concept at the time. So I can't blame anyone, not the installer, the people that did the design. This is all on me. And before you all jump into the comments and start telling me I should have installed an AC coupled system, these are a lot more inefficient. Not only do you need to do the DC to AC to DC conversion, you incur losses in every time you transform DC into AC or AC into DC. But your battery also needs another inverter. Now, some of the more modern AC batteries come with those inverters built in, but they're usually pretty small, sort of 3 to 5 kilowatts. And that's kind of typical for these kind of systems. So yes, AC coupled batteries do have their place, but you also need a second inverter to make them work. Now what I should have done was specified a much larger inverter than the 3.6 kilowatt system, somewhere in the 8 to 10 kilowatt region. And then what we could have done was set an export limit to the grid to make sure that we weren't pushing any more power than the grid allows. Now, here in the UK, we have something called the DNO, the Distributed Network Operator. They run the kind of backbone of the electricity grid in our area. We have to get permission from them to be able to export power, and they will set a limit as to how much we can export. That could have been easily configured into the inverter. But even with a larger inverter, we wouldn't have exported very much. Having 2 EVs and a solar hot water diverter, we would have exported next to nothing. I also thought, remember, I didn't really understand the concepts at the time, that this would have worked in off-grid mode, or sometimes known as island mode. This allows you to continue to use your system during a power cut. And the reason I thought this was the documentation that I read said SolarEdge has a feature coming soon which will allow this. It turns out coming soon should read, you will also need to upgrade your inverter to a new model. So what did I learn? DC coupled batteries are more efficient than AC coupled ones, but with a hybrid inverter installed, you limit your options. I believe in the UK, 3.6 kilowatts is a magic number for installers because they can get them installed under what's known as the G98 regulations. This is much cheaper, requires much less paperwork on their part. To install something bigger, like an 8 to 10 kilowatt inverter, would have required a G99 approval, more expensive, more paperwork. So if you're about to install solar, check what your home draws at max load. On that cold winter's evening, what are you going to be running from an electrical point of view? And spec your inverter accordingly. Even if you're going to have 6 kilowatts of panels, a 10 kilowatt inverter might be ideal for you, especially if you've got the batteries that can supply that. And you can always oversize the inverter and set an export limit to comply with your DNO's regulations. After living with that system for 2 years, we've now solved the problem. How did we do this? Well, that's a story for another video. If you're embarking on your own solar journey, understand the differences between hybrid and AC coupled solutions. Measure your usage and specify your inverter size based on that, not what your installer recommends. Now, great installers might take that into account, but others may just recommend a 3.6 kilowatt inverter because it's easy for them. So my mistake was not checking out exactly what the load of my house was, how much power I expected to use in the worst case scenario, and consequently, I ended up having to replace that inverter, and we did some other changes as well, which I'll talk about in another video, but it ended up costing me nearly £5,000. Please, please, please don't make that same mistake. I hope you found this video useful, and if I'm lucky, I'll see you back here for the next one.